The day she buried her baby was the day her world stopped. The tiny white coffin, the silence in the room, the way everyone avoided her eyes, it all felt unreal. She kept telling herself it was a nightmare she would wake up from. But days turned into weeks and the emptiness only grew deeper. No cries at night, no little hands to hold, just a quiet that hurt more than anything. But then something strange happened. Months later, while trying to rebuild her life, she saw a child, a little girl who looked painfully familiar. The same eyes, the same smile, even the same small birthmark she had memorized. Her heart started racing. It couldn't be, could it? The child was with another woman. A woman who held her close like a mother would. Like her mother should have. Confused, shaken, and desperate for answers, she began to dig deeper into the truth. And what she discovered would change everything she thought she knew about that tragic day. Because her baby didn't just die. Or at least that's what she was told. She tried to convince herself she was imagining things. Grief can play tricks on the mind, people had told her. It can make you see what you want to see. But this didn't feel like imagination. This felt real. Too real. That night she couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that little girl's face. The way her tiny fingers wrapped around the other woman's hand. The soft laugh that sounded exactly like the one she had only heard for a few short weeks before everything was taken from her. Her chest tightened as the memories came rushing back. The hospital room, the cold words from the doctor, the papers she had signed without even understanding them fully. She sat up in bed, her heart pounding. Something about that day, something didn't add up. The next morning she went back to the place where she had seen the child. It was a small park, quiet and simple, the kind of place mothers brought their children in the evenings. She sat on a bench, trying to act normal, but her eyes scanned every corner, waiting, hoping. And then she saw them again. The same woman. The same child. This time she didn't look away. She watched carefully. The way the woman spoke, the way the child responded. There was love there, no doubt about it. Real deep love. That made everything even more confusing. If this was her child, then how? Her hands trembled as she stood up and slowly walked closer. Her mind was screaming at her to stop, to think, to not jump to conclusions. But her heart was pulling her forward. She got close enough to hear their voices. "Stay close, okay?" the woman said gently, adjusting the child's jacket. The little girl nodded, her big eyes shining. "Okay, Mama." Mama. The word hit her like a wave. She felt her knees weaken for a second, but she forced herself to stay standing. That word should have been hers. That voice calling someone else Mama felt like something breaking inside her all over again. She turned away quickly, her breath shaky. This was too much. She needed answers, not guesses. That same afternoon, she went back to the hospital. Walking through those doors again felt like stepping into a memory she had tried so hard to forget. The smell, the sound of distant footsteps, the quiet conversations, it all came rushing back. She hesitated at the front desk, unsure of what exactly she was even asking for. I need to see the records," she said softly. "From last year. My baby's records." The receptionist looked at her with a polite but distant expression. "Do you have an appointment?" She shook her head. "No, but it's important." After a few moments of waiting, she was directed to another office. A woman there pulled up her file, scanning through it quickly. "According to these records," the woman said, her voice calm and professional, "your baby was declared gone shortly after birth." The words felt cold. Clinical. Final. "But I never saw her," she replied quietly. "I was told she was too weak, that it was better if I didn't." Her voice trailed off. At the time she had trusted them. She had been exhausted, scared, and alone. Everything had happened so fast. The woman in the office nodded slightly. "That can happen in difficult cases." Difficult cases. It didn't feel like enough. "Is there anything else?" she asked, her voice a little stronger now. "Any details? Anyone who was there that day?" The woman hesitated for just a second before answering. "There was a nurse assigned to your case. But she doesn't work here anymore." Something about that answer made her chest tighten again. "Do you have her name?" she asked. After a brief pause, the woman turned the screen slightly and pointed. "It's listed there." She memorized it. That night, sitting alone at her kitchen table, she stared at the name written on a small piece of paper. Felt like a clue. A small piece of something bigger. Something hidden. She picked up her phone and started searching. It didn't take long to find a few traces. An old profile, a different workplace, a location not too far from where she lived. Her heart started racing again. This was it. This could be the person who knew what really happened. But then doubt crept in. What if she was wrong? What if this was just her grief leading her down a path that would only hurt more? She closed her eyes, trying to steady herself. But the image of that little girl came back again. The same eyes. The same smile. No, she couldn't ignore this. The next day, she found herself standing outside a small clinic. The sign was simple, almost easy to miss. Her hands felt cold as she reached for the door. This was the moment. The moment where things could either make sense or fall apart completely. She stepped inside. A few minutes later, she was sitting across from a woman who looked slightly older than she expected. Composed. But there was something in her eyes, something that shifted when she heard why she was there. I think you were there the day my baby was born, she said carefully. The nurse's expression didn't change much, but her silence said more than words. And I think something went wrong, she continued, her voice trembling just slightly. Because I saw a child, and she looks exactly like. Please, the nurse interrupted softly. That one word was enough to send a chill down her spine. The room felt smaller suddenly. The air heavier. Some things, the nurse said slowly, choosing her words, are not as simple as they seem. Her heart started pounding again. What does that mean? She asked. But the nurse didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked toward the door as if making sure no one else was listening. And when she finally spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. If you keep looking into this, you need to be very careful. A cold fear settled in her chest. Because now it wasn't just about a mistake anymore. It felt like something was being hidden on purpose. And whatever the truth was, someone didn't want her to find it. Her hands were still shaking when she left the clinic. The nurse's last words kept repeating in her mind like a warning she couldn't escape. Be careful. Simple words, but they carried weight she didn't understand yet. She walked out into the street, but everything around her felt different now. The world didn't look normal anymore. It looked like something was hiding behind every corner. She stood there for a long time, unsure of what to do next. Part of her wanted to stop. To go home. To tell herself again that grief had made her imagine things. But the image of the little girl kept pulling her forward, stronger than fear, stronger than doubt. That night she couldn't stay still. She sat in her room, going through everything again and again in her mind. The hospital records. The nurse's silence. The child calling another woman mama. It all connected in a way that made her chest tighten. Something had been taken from her, or something had been hidden from her. Either way, the truth was not what she had been told. The next morning she made a decision. If no one would explain it, she would find out herself. She started with small steps. She went back to the hospital area, not inside this time, but around it. She spoke carefully to people nearby, pretending she was just asking general questions. Most avoided her. Some didn't remember. But one old security guard finally stopped when she mentioned the nurse's name. His expression changed slightly. She used to work night shifts, he said slowly, glancing around before speaking again. Quiet woman. Kept to herself. Do you know why she left? She asked quickly. He hesitated. People said she left suddenly. No notice. Just gone one day. That was not normal. Not for someone working in a hospital. Did anything happen around that time? She asked. The guard scratched his head, thinking. There was talk about a mistake. Something serious. But no one said it clearly. Her heart jumped. What kind of mistake? He lowered his voice. Babies sometimes get mixed records. That's what I heard. But nothing was ever confirmed. Mixed records. The words hit her like a shock she wasn't prepared for. She thanked him quickly and walked away, her mind spinning. If records could be mixed, then what else could have been switched? What else could have been changed without anyone noticing? That night, she did something she never thought she would do. She started looking into the woman she had seen with the child. It wasn't easy, but she noticed small details. The woman visited the same park every few days. She picked up the child from the same small daycare. She followed a routine. A careful, controlled routine, like someone who didn't want attention. But there was something else too. Something strange. The child never went far from her. Never alone. Always watched closely. Almost protectively. That confused her even more. If something had been wrong, if something had been hidden, why would the child be so loved? So cared for? She started questioning everything again. The next afternoon she went back to the park, sitting farther this time, pretending to be on her phone. Her eyes stayed fixed on them. The child was playing near the swings, laughing with another kid. The sound made her heart ache in a way she couldn't explain. The woman sat on a bench, watching closely, always alert. Then something unexpected happened. A man approached them. He looked tense, his steps quick. The woman's body language changed immediately. She stood up slightly, placing herself closer to the child without even thinking. The man said something she couldn't hear from where she was sitting. But the woman shook her head firmly. There was a brief moment of silence, then the man left. But the tension didn't leave with him. Her heart raced. Who was that man? And why did the woman react like that? Later that evening she followed a different lead. The nurse's old address. It took time asking around, but eventually she found a small house at the edge of the town. It looked quiet, almost abandoned in some ways. She stood outside for a long time before finally knocking. No answer. She knocked again. This time the door slowly opened. The same nurse stood there. But now she didn't look calm anymore. She looked tired. Worried. Like someone who had been waiting for this moment for a long time. I told you to be careful, she said quietly, her voice heavier than before. I need the truth, she replied immediately. All of it. I saw that child again. I know something is wrong. The nurse stepped aside slowly, letting her in without another word. Inside the house it was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that made every sound feel louder. The nurse closed the door and stood there for a moment as if deciding something. Then she finally spoke. You don't understand what you're getting into, she said. I don't care, she replied, her voice shaking but firm. I just want to know what happened to my baby. At that moment, the nurse looked at her with an expression she couldn't read. And what she said next made everything feel even more uncertain than before. Are you sure, the nurse asked softly, that the child you saw is the one you think she is? The question hung in the air like a crack forming in the ground beneath her feet. Because for the first time, she realized the truth might not just be hidden. It might be completely different from everything she had believed. The nurse's question didn't leave her mind. It stayed there like a heavy echo repeating itself over and over. Are you sure the child you saw is the one you think she is? Every time she tried to make sense of it, her thoughts broke into pieces again. She stood inside the small house, unable to move for a moment. The air felt tight, like there wasn't enough space to breathe properly. The nurse didn't speak again right away. Instead, she slowly walked toward a chair and sat down, as if her strength had left her all at once. You came too far, the nurse finally said, her voice low. I warned you because I knew this would happen. I just want the truth, she replied, her voice shaking but firm. No more half answers. No more silence. The nurse looked at her for a long moment. Then she stood up again and walked to a drawer. Her hands hesitated before opening it, like she wasn't sure if she should. Finally, she pulled out a small worn file. This was never supposed to leave the system, she said quietly. Her heart started pounding. What is it? The nurse didn't answer immediately. She placed the file on the table but didn't open it. Years ago, she began slowly, there was pressure in the hospital. Too many cases, too many emergencies. Mistakes were made, and some of them were never corrected properly. Her chest tightened. What does that have to do with me? The nurse finally met her eyes. Your case was one of them. The room felt like it tilted slightly. She grabbed the edge of the table for balance. You said my baby didn't survive, she whispered. I said what was written in the records, the nurse replied, her voice trembling now. But records are only as good as the hands that write them. Silence filled the room again. She looked at the file but didn't touch it. And the child I saw? She asked slowly. The girl with the woman at the park? The nurse hesitated. That's where it gets complicated, she said. Her stomach dropped. Complicated how? Before the nurse could answer, a loud sound came from outside. A car door closing. Then footsteps. Both of them froze. The nurse's face changed instantly. They found you here? She whispered. Who? She asked quickly, fear rising in her chest. But the nurse didn't answer. Instead, she rushed to the window and looked outside. Her face went pale. You need to leave. Now. Not until you tell me what's going on, she said, her voice rising. I've been pushed around, lied to, sent in circles. I deserve to know the truth. The footsteps outside got closer. The nurse turned back to her, urgency in her eyes now. This is bigger than you think. Bigger than a mistake. Some people don't want this opened again. Her mind raced. Are you talking about the hospital? The nurse shook her head slightly. Not just the hospital. A sharp knock came at the door. Both of them went silent. Another knock. Harder this time. The nurse grabbed her arm. Hide. Please. But she didn't move. Her eyes were fixed on the door. I'm not running anymore. The knock came again, followed by a voice from outside. Come. Controlled. We know you're inside. Her breath caught. The nurse pulled her back slightly. You don't understand what they can do if they think you're digging into this. Her heart was pounding so loudly she could barely think. Who are they? But before she could get an answer, the doorknob started turning. Slowly. Deliberately. Her entire body froze as the door began to open. And in that moment, everything she thought she was close to understanding felt like it was about to shift again. The nurse whispered one last thing, barely audible. Whatever you do, don't trust everything you think you know about that child. The door creaked wider. And the truth she had been chasing for so long was finally standing right at the edge of revealing itself. Steady herself. Everything she had built her grief on, everything she had believed, it was all being pulled apart piece by piece. Then another thought hit her. The child. The little girl at the park. Her voice dropped. The child I saw, with the woman. What does she have to do with this? The man exchanged a quick look with the nurse before answering. That child is at the center of why this was never meant to resurface. Her pulse spiked again. Stop talking in riddles. Just tell me the truth. But instead of answering, the man pulled something from his pocket. A small photo. He placed it on the table. Her breath stopped. It was a hospital photo. Newborn records. 2 babies side by side in medical blankets. But what made her legs weaken was what was written underneath. 2 names. 2 identities. Swapped notes. Corrected. Rewritten. Then erased again. Her hands reached for the table for support. This doesn't prove anything, she whispered, but her voice had lost strength. The nurse spoke softly now, almost like she was confessing. One child was taken home by the wrong family. Her heart stopped for a second. Taken? The man nodded slowly. Not intentionally. But yes. She shook her head again, tears forming now without control. No, that's not what I saw. That child, she looks like me. She reacts like me. That can't just be coincidence. The nurse stepped closer, her voice breaking slightly. That's what made it harder to fix. The resemblance. The connection. It made everything more complicated than anyone expected. Her mind felt like it was breaking apart. Then suddenly, another sound came from outside. Not a knock this time. Voices. Multiple voices. The man immediately moved toward the window and pulled the curtain slightly. His expression changed. They're here, he said quietly. Her chest tightened again. Who is they? The nurse grabbed her arm again, but this time it wasn't to hide her. It was more like she didn't know what else to do. People who don't want this reopened, the nurse said. People who benefited from keeping it buried. Her breath became shallow. You mean the hospital? The man shook his head slowly. Not just the hospital. The voices outside got louder now. Clear. A vehicle door slammed. Steps moved closer. The man turned back to her. You need to decide right now. Decide what? She asked, panic rising. He held her gaze firmly. Whether you want the truth, or safety. Her heart pounded violently. The nurse looked at her with desperate eyes. If you open this fully, there's no going back. Another knock came, harder than before. The door shook slightly this time. The man spoke again, lower this time. Because once they know you've reached this point, they won't stop. Her entire body went cold. And then, from outside the door, a final voice called out. Open the door. We need to talk about the child you've been asking about. Her breath caught in her throat. Because that voice was familiar. And that was the moment she realized this wasn't just about a mistake in the hospital anymore. It was about something far bigger, and far closer to her life than she ever imagined. Her whole body went still when she heard the voice outside the door. It wasn't just familiar, it was one she had heard in her most painful moments. The same tone that had spoken softly in the hospital. The same voice that had once told her to sign the papers, to trust the process, to let go. Her breath caught in her throat. The nurse looked at her instantly, reading the shock on her face. You know that voice, the nurse whispered. She couldn't answer. Her mind was spinning too fast. Another knock came, firmer this time. The man stood between her and the door now, his jaw tight. Open it, the voice outside repeated. We know she's inside. The man turned slightly, looking at her and the nurse. This is it, he said quietly. Once we open that door, everything comes out. Her hands were shaking, but something inside her had already passed fear. It had turned into something sharper. Something stronger. I want the truth, she said again, her voice steady this time. No matter what. The nurse closed her eyes for a moment, like she was accepting something she had been avoiding for years. The man finally reached for the door handle. It opened slowly. Cold air rushed in from outside as two figures stood there. One of them was the voice she recognized immediately. A former hospital administrator. The same man who had handled her case years ago. Beside him stood another official-looking person, silent but observant. The administrator looked directly at her. "So you found her," he said calmly, as if this was something expected. Her heart pounded. "Tell me what happened to my baby," she said without hesitation. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stepped inside like he owned the space. "You've been digging into records that were never meant to be reopened," he said slowly. "Because the situation was controlled." Her hands curled into fists. "Controlled? You told me my baby died." The nurse stepped forward suddenly. "That's what was recorded," she said firmly, her voice breaking but honest. "But not what happened." The room went silent. The administrator sighed like this was all an inconvenience. There was a mix-up. 2 newborns. Similar conditions. Emergency situation. It was chaos. Her voice rose. "Stop calling it chaos. That's my child you're talking about." The man from earlier stepped forward now. "Then listen carefully," he said firmly. "Because this is the truth they tried to bury." All eyes turned to him. He pointed at the administrator. One baby was mistakenly registered under the wrong file. Instead of correcting it properly, the hospital chose to quietly adjust records to avoid legal consequences. Her knees weakened slightly, but she stayed standing. The nurse spoke softly. "They told me to stay quiet. I refused later, that's why I left." Her breath shook. "So my baby didn't die?" A long silence followed. Then the man nodded slowly. "No. Your baby survived." The words hit her like a shockwave. She stumbled slightly, grabbing the edge of the table. "Then where is she?" she whispered. The administrator looked away for the first time. And that silence told her everything. Her eyes widened. "The child I saw, at the park." The nurse stepped closer, tears in her eyes now. "She is yours." Her heart stopped. Everything she had felt, every strange connection, every overwhelming pull toward that little girl suddenly made sense. The face she couldn't forget. The eyes that felt familiar. The bond she couldn't explain. She shook her head slowly, overwhelmed. "Then why is she with another woman?" The man finally answered. "Because after the mistake, the child was placed into an adoption process that wasn't properly reviewed. The woman you saw, she adopted her legally." Her chest tightened painfully. "So she doesn't even know?" The nurse shook her head. "No. She believes she is her real mother." A painful silence filled the room. Her emotions crashed all at once. Relief, grief, confusion, anger. Everything she had lost and everything she had just found collided inside her. Then suddenly she looked at the administrator again. "And you knew?" she asked quietly. He hesitated. That hesitation was enough. Her voice turned cold. "You all knew." No one answered. The man beside her spoke carefully. "We found out later. But by then, it was already too complicated to reverse without harming the child's life." Her eyes filled with tears. "So I was just erased?" The nurse stepped closer quickly. "No. That's why I couldn't stay silent anymore. That's why I helped you find this." Her breathing was uneven. The truth was finally in front of her, but it didn't feel like peace. It felt like pain layered on top of pain. Then the administrator spoke again, quieter this time. "If this becomes public, it will destroy multiple lives. Not just yours. Not just ours. The child's life will change completely." She looked at him sharply. "You think I care about hiding this now?" Silence again. Then slowly she wiped her tears. "I don't want revenge," she said quietly. "I just want my daughter." The room went still. The man nodded slightly. "Then you have to be careful. Because the family she is with, they won't let her go easily either. They love her." Her heart tightened again at those words. Because she knew it was true. And that made everything even harder. The nurse placed a hand on her shoulder gently. "You have a choice now. But whatever you choose, it has to be for her, not against anyone." She closed her eyes for a moment. For years she had lived in grief. Now she was standing in truth. But the hardest part wasn't finding out what happened. It was deciding what to do next. As she opened her eyes again, she realized one thing clearly. This wasn't the end of the story. It was only the beginning of a much harder reality. The room stayed silent after her words. No one spoke for a while, as if even the air itself needed time to settle after everything that had been revealed. She stood there, still trying to process it all. Her daughter. Alive. Real. Growing up somewhere else, calling another woman mother without knowing the truth. It should have felt like happiness. But it didn't. It felt complicated. Heavy. Like her heart had been split into two different truths that didn't know how to exist together. The nurse finally broke the silence gently. "You don't have to decide everything today," she said softly. "But now you know the truth. And that changes everything." She nodded slowly, but her eyes stayed distant. "I can't just walk away," she whispered. "Not after knowing this." The man who had brought everything to light stepped forward slightly. "No one is asking you to walk away," he said. But rushing in without a plan could hurt the child more than help her. That word child hit her again. Not baby. Not memory. A living child. A little girl who had a life, friends, a home, and a woman she trusted as her mother. Her chest tightened. "So what am I supposed to do?" she asked quietly. "Just stay silent again?" The nurse shook her head. "No. But you have to approach this carefully. The legal records can be challenged. The hospital has already started internal review after pressure from outside. But custody cases, especially involving emotional bonds, are never simple." She looked down at her hands. They were no longer shaking as badly, but the weight in her chest was still there. "I don't want to take her away from a life she knows," she said honestly. "But I also can't pretend she isn't mine." The administrator, who had been silent for a long time, finally spoke again, but his tone was different now. Softer. "There is a way to handle this without shocking her world completely. It will take time. Counseling. Legal steps. A slow introduction." She looked at him carefully. This was the same man who had once told her her baby was gone. Now he was talking about solutions. It didn't erase the past, but it showed something had shifted. "Why help now?" she asked him quietly. He exhaled slowly. "Because the truth was never meant to be buried forever. And because that child deserves honesty when the time is right. Not silence." Her eyes burned slightly, but she didn't cry this time. She just nodded. Days passed after that night. Nothing was immediate anymore. Everything moved slowly, carefully. There were meetings with legal advisors, quiet discussions, and long hours where she had to wait instead of act. The nurse helped guide her through hospital documents and explained what really happened behind the scenes that night of confusion. It wasn't one single mistake. It was a chain of small failures, rushed decisions, and fear of responsibility that turned into something bigger than anyone admitted. Meanwhile, she watched from a distance again. The little girl still went to the park. Still laughed. Still held the hand of the woman she believed was her mother. And every time she saw her, her heart pulled in two directions at once. One evening she sat on the same bench, just watching quietly. The wind was soft, the sky turning orange. The child ran across the grass, completely unaware of the storm of truth waiting around her life. The adoptive mother noticed her again this time. Their eyes met for a brief moment. There was hesitation, confusion, then something else. Recognition. Not of identity, but of emotion. Of connection that couldn't be explained. The woman didn't approach. She just held the child closer for a moment, protective, uncertain. And in that moment she understood something important. This wasn't about taking or losing. It was about building trust where everything had been broken. Weeks turned into months. Slowly, carefully, the truth was prepared for the child in a way she could understand when she was older. The legal process began quietly in the background, not to separate her from the life she knew, but to establish the truth of her identity with care and protection. She was allowed small, supervised moments near her daughter. At first from a distance, then slightly closer. Never forced. Never rushed. The first time the little girl spoke to her, it was simple. "Do I know you?" Her heart stopped for a moment. But she smiled gently. "I think we're getting to know each other," she said softly. And that was enough for now. The child smiled back and ran off again, back into her world of innocence. She stood there for a long time watching her. Not as someone who had lost everything, but as someone who had found something she thought was gone forever. The nurse later told her, "Sometimes truth doesn't come all at once. It comes in pieces you can survive." And she understood that now. Because the truth didn't just give her pain. It gave her a future she could slowly step into. Not perfect, not easy, but real. One evening, as she stood again at the edge of the park, she whispered to herself, "I found you." Not as an ending, but as a beginning that would take time, patience, and love to rebuild. And as the little girl laughed in the distance, unaware of everything that had changed, she finally allowed herself to believe that even broken stories can still find healing. The truth had not destroyed everything. It had only revealed what needed to be rebuilt, with care, honesty, and time.